When I first started my business, I had a client who was literally asking me for deliverables on Christmas Day. I'm not even kidding. So many people will immediately say that client is ridiculous and jump to blaming the client, but I will say that it's a little bit ridiculous that I didn't have boundaries put in place to prevent that from happening in the first place. It is not entirely that client's fault, truthfully. They were just responding to the access that I allowed.
I also want to note that I am still currently working on Christmas every year.
Okay, we're all in this together. I also am working on enforcing better boundaries.
I'm dead. But the point that you made was beautiful.
In today's episode, we are covering red flags in the workplace. But ultimately, this episode is all about learning how to protect your energy, trust your gut, and enforce boundaries. Whether you are working in a corporate environment or managing client relationships, these lessons will really help you lead with clarity and self-respect.
By the end of today's episode, you'll know how to recognize red flags before they spiral into burnout. You'll learn how to set boundaries without making it this big confrontational moment, and you'll walk away with a deeper understanding of how to build mutual respect in your work relationships.
Welcome to Untitled,
a podcast and educational brand where the nostalgia of higher education meets the sharp edge of a corporate boardroom.
I'm Sophie.
And I'm Alex.
And together we deliver no BS insights for ambitious freelancers, corporate climbers, multi-hyphenates, and business owners.
By challenging the limits of a single title, we're here to empower you to redefine success
and make your work work for you. Class is in session. All right, lesson 1. A red flag is not a one-off human moment. It is a pattern.
Love this lesson. I feel like it just hits so hard because, of course, there are going to be isolated moments of conflict and tension. But in my opinion, after half a decade working for myself and working with so many different types of people and personalities, a red flag is not a one-off human moment. It is consistent, especially after you've recognized it already.
I could not agree more. I think it's also when you recognize these red flags, it's so important to address them as early as possible, which I know is so hard, but the more you do it, the better you'll get at it. And if you don't address it early, it starts becoming the norm of how you're going to be treated.
Yeah, it's really approaching it in as proactive as you can be, versus handling it in a reactive way.
100%.
Because we're not amazing in reactive moments as humans. We don't manage them well. And so the more proactive you can be, the better the communication is going to be, the better decision making that you can have.
I used to be a very reactive person. My dad used to be a very, very reactive person growing up. He had a lot of anger and did not place it very well, and he would get super angry really quick at the smallest things, and you could see that reactive behavior in him. And this is not a diss at my dad. My dad is an amazing human being. As soon as my dad started making meditation a committed daily practice, his reactions got so different. And I, growing up in the environment where I had a very reactive parent, I was very reactive as well. I would come into situations that I was dealing with at my high school jobs and be very reactive, and it was not productive for me or anybody else on the team. Literally at these coffee shops I was working at or the restaurant I was working at, my reaction was not productive. And I'm telling you guys, meditation is so amazing. And if you feel like you are reactive, please, I have the app Headspace that I use every single day, and just learn how to meditate. It's amazing. I can talk about it for days, but I'm not going to talk about it in this episode, even though this episode is a lot about protecting your energy. And that is an amazing tip to help you do that.
We're going to talk about how to address these red flags later on in the episode. But I think some early questions to ask yourself to sort of determine or qualify whether something is really a red flag or is it just a messy human moment. One, do I feel consistently drained? 2, am I making excuses for them? And 3, have I brought this up before? Have I brought this behavior up before and seen no change?
You have to bring it up before you judge it, by the way. If you're not communicating that something might be bothering you,
you're the red flag.
You're the red flag.
You're the red flag.
You are the red flag.
Sorry to say it. You can also stick out bad behavior, of course. But ultimately, if you're feeling any of these things, you're also most likely no longer engaged in what you're doing at your highest level of performance. And so ultimately, you aren't helping yourself. You're also not helping that person that you think you're just going at it and getting over their bad behavior to keep helping them. That's not a real story.
Right.
That's a story you're telling yourself. But you're no longer making impact because you are disengaged.
And if you're showing up in your work disengaged or even like halfway engaged, you are not serving anyone. You are doing yourself a disservice. You are doing that business a disservice.
You have to take accountability for the part that you play.
100%. And sometimes the most professional thing you can do is just acknowledge that you are no longer the right fit in that business or with that client.
Yeah. I think you also need to personally determine the difference between what a red flag for you is and what's a deal breaker.
It's different for everybody.
It's different for everybody. Everyone is going to have different boundaries and different levels of comfort. And I mean, we can really talk about everything from clients texting you outside of work hours to, if you're a designer, like someone giving you really extremely vague feedback and then saying they hate it afterwards. You have to determine what's a red flag and what's a deal breaker. I think there's also stages to red flags. I think the early stages of something becoming a true red flag is asking for things out of scope, a little bit of scope creep. It's happening, but it's not something that's been recurrent.
Or your manager asking you to take on additional responsibilities is another way of putting that if you are working full-time in a corporate role.
We're going to move on to mid-stage red flag. To me, that's like late payments. And I think also just continuous unclear communication is a huge mid-stage indicator. And then late stage is where you are feeling that physical manifestation of the red flag relationship. That's resentment, anxiety, dread, things you're physically feeling in your body.
And that comes on, guys, 90% of the time that comes on because you were not communicating about those early mid red flags. That's why in the beginning of this episode, we said to really try your hardest to state the red flags, communicate about them as soon as you see them early on, because they can manifest themselves in really unhealthy, horrible ways like resentment and anxiety. And you do not want to get to that place.
And that perfectly sets us up for lesson 2, which is the cause of most red flag situations is misaligned expectations and or bad communication. Many red flags stem from lack of clarity around roles, timelines, deliverables, you name it. It's just that overall lack of clarity. And I've had so many of my own personal experiences with this where I was on the red flag side as a service provider.
Admit it, babe.
You know, because I think it's easy to not create clarity. It's harder to create clarity. It's harder to communicate your needs and expectations. That's harder. Do the harder thing.
Mm-hmm.
And
you actually choose your hard.
Yeah.
I love this concept.
Hard.
Choose your hard. Both of them are very hard. You're just experiencing which hard you're going to choose first.
One's delayed and one's immediate.
Exactly.
If you are working on really being better at having clearer communication, setting better boundaries, providing a lot of clarity for the people that you're working with, that is uncomfortable. That is hard when you first start doing it. Versus you could maybe cop out and not do those things. You're still going to experience that hard later. Why is documenting and defining expectations upfront healthy?
Can you say that again, teacher?
Gaps in assumptions is so big, and I think you're going to like this. Every organization, every person does things differently, and every client is used to different systems and has different limitations around what they can and can't do. Stop making assumptions about what somebody can or can't do or how they do something or don't do something. Because, I mean, from a freelance perspective, if you think a check-in is a Slack message and somebody else thinks it's a meeting and you're not clear about that expectation up front, you're not communicating that, guess what? That's your first week, you're already disconnected. The expectations are already so different. And I think that's the same thing in a corporate role. When you get into a corporate environment and they do something a specific way, they need to communicate that to you so that you can fit in to what they have set up.
Yeah. And I also there's a little bit of a responsibility on you too to also ask in a corporate role, like, how are things done? But they should be training you in clear ways with clear expectations right outside the gate.
Yeah, because I mean, I think smart organizations have systems.
Right.
And they know what systems work.
Yeah.
And so I just think that's such a key point. Don't make assumptions. There's disparity between you and the assumption that you're making. And I think you can reduce a lot of these misaligned expectations and bad communication because of it. And then I think going back to kind of what Sophie and I were saying, being really clear is uncomfortable for a lot of people. For me personally, when I was first starting out, it was something that was really uncomfortable for me. Now, like, I'm almost so far on the other side of the spectrum. Like, I am so clear up front and I do it in a really kind and respectful way. But maybe at times I do come off rigid to somebody that's maybe not as comfortable.
Yeah.
When
I first started working with you, Alex, I was like, is she okay? She does not like me.
You can risk coming off rigid. You know, and I think there is some posturing that you do need to have, especially when you're meeting people for the first time. And I probably need to work on that. But, you know, we all have things to work on. We all have fucking things to work on. So,
facts. Okay.
The last thing that I'm going to say is I think it's really common to think that over communication is a bad thing. I actually learned this from the agency owner that I still work with.
I love over communication.
I literally hated it. And I think part of it came from like me not thinking I was doing enough to communicate. Like, I'm like, oh, well, this isn't like a super epic report to give you. No, they do. You're right. They do. And I didn't understand that because I don't want to hear from you 500 times. And so I think it was my personal preference. I was projecting that on other people. So don't do that. Again, that's an assumption. Me making an assumption. So over communicate. If you're working on a project and you feel like you just haven't done enough to have a report, you have. I'm just going to tell you, you have. And you should send that text. You should send that email. You should make that call and just update the person that you're working with on what you're doing, even if it seems small to you.
I love when when the people that work for me at my agency update me. Oh my God. Like, I'm in my head, I'm asking myself, like, I'm taking myself back. I'm holding myself back from asking, what's the status? Like, I don't want to be a micromanager, but I want to know where you're at, what you're doing. It makes me feel so comfortable. It also makes me, as someone who's managing you, a lot more confident in the work that you're doing with me.
Yeah, that's also just such a soother for somebody with anxiety, though, as well. And you know, like trusting people and delegating. Guys, watch our episode on delegation.
Oh my God.
We talk about this stuff on there.
All right, lesson 3. You teach people how to treat you. Not by telling them, but by how you act.
This is foundational. You don't need to go full scorched earth when somebody has bad behavior or you spot a red flag. Like, we're not going, if you've ever seen Inside Out where the guy's like red flames, we don't need to do that when we see a red flag. You just need to enforce a really clear, specific boundary and then watch what happens next. That's my therapist's favorite thing to say. Watch what happens next. From that information that you get by watching what happens next, you are going to be able to determine what you need to move forward.
Exactly.
If they're not giving you what you need to move forward, you can't move forward.
Goodbye.
The boundary's for you. It's not for them.
In therapy and in a lot of just like leadership coaching, I always hear, communicate your boundaries. You have to communicate your boundaries. Communicate this, communicate that. And yeah, you do have to communicate your boundaries, but truly boundaries are set by your actions and your behavior as well. What are you doing after you're watching how they act after you communicate your boundary, like what you just said?
If you're just saying, hi, I'm unavailable between X and X time, and then they go and text you during that time, then you're like running to your phone to text back. Ma'am, who are you kidding?
Right.
Where's the boundary? I don't see her. If you never say, hey, that actually doesn't work for me, then you're training the person on the other end of your boundary that, hey, they can do it. You're giving them permission.
There's a woman named Nedra Glover Tawwab, and she is an expert on boundary setting, and she teaches that boundaries do not have to be portrayed as this big direct event. And actually, subtle action-based boundaries are way more important anyway. In her book, Set Boundaries, Find Peace, she actually gives you these really amazing sample scripts you can use to communicate your boundaries. But even more, she teaches you how to act in alignment with the boundaries that you want to set. Because boundaries that are not backed by behavior will eventually be ignored. People will walk over you.
They'll be instantly ignored.
Exactly. So first, I want to go over some scripts that she has. She goes into detail in her book about setting boundaries in relationships, setting boundaries with yourself, but she also has a section that really talks about work. So I'm going to focus in there for this episode, and Alex and I are going to talk about different situations and the exact script that she gives you for that situation.
I'm going to say the situation that Nedra gives, and then Sophie is going to respond with the script. For coworkers who interrupt you constantly.
I'm in the middle of something right now. Can you please send me an email instead?
When somebody wants to meet during your lunch hour.
I'm actually not available during that time, but let's look at some other slots that will work for both of us.
If your boss messages you off hours and it's not urgent.
Thanks for the message. I'll take care of this first thing tomorrow when I'm back online.
If someone keeps giving you work that's not your responsibility.
I want to support you, but this is not something I am able to take on at the moment. It's short and quick like that, you guys. I think a lot of people get so scared to communicate boundaries, especially in corporate settings, because there's a clear power dynamic. People don't want to say no to their boss, and people view these boundary setting behaviors almost like they're rebellious
or disrespectful.
But really, you guys, it's just about clarity.
I think Nedra's such a queen for this because she also made these so short on purpose.
Right.
Have you ever sat in your text, like rewriting a paragraph 5 times?
Trying to like give excuses why you're setting the boundary? You don't need excuses.
No, you just need to communicate respectfully and kindly.
I really want to talk about this whole like power dynamic in a corporate setting because it can be so difficult to push back on your boss. It's just a really hard thing for people to do. And it's very common if you feel this way, know that you're not alone. But boundary setting is just being clear. And your boss will respect you so much more when you are acting in alignment with what you can and cannot take on at the moment. And it's not about saying no. Boundaries are not saying no. It's about learning what to prioritize and how to reorganize what you have currently going on. If your boss or even a client is coming to you with additional work, it is actually your responsibility to remind them, hey, I'm working on this right now. Is this additional task that you're giving me falling higher on the priority list? I'm happy to shift things around. Just let me know. Because if you're getting that additional task, you're going to have to move something else down. That's not resistance. That's not being rebellious. That's called being responsible. And the same approach applies with client relationships. Boundaries are a part of how you train your client to work with you.
And, I think when you say the word train, sometimes it has this like negative connotation. And we're not saying like you're training your client like a dog, but we are saying like give them some guidance at least. So if they're used to texting somebody at 6 p.m. with requests, that's okay that they're used to that. What you're going to say is, just so you know for next time, I unplug after 6 p.m. I can get back to you tomorrow morning. It's just soft communication like that. There's no negativity there.
Right.
It's just like, hey, appreciate you contacting me. This is obviously normal for you. This is what's normal for me. This is how we're going to work together better.
Communicating your boundaries in a soft way that makes the other person feel seen, heard, and supported. When you act like your time is valuable, other people are going to start treating like it is as well. So boundaries are not about putting up walls. Boundaries are not about saying no. They're about building systems of mutual respect. And you can do that with a client, and you can absolutely do that with your boss. Okay, lesson number 4. Ooh, this one hits. This is something that Alex and I are both really struggling with right now. And we are giving you guys a really great resource, a book that I read. I don't know if Alex has read this book, but I need to read it again. It's been a second since I've read it. The lesson is your nervous system will spot red flags before your brain does.
Most of the time, your body knows before your mind does. That's that gut feeling. And specifically in this situation, I think it can manifest as this tension, this dread. I kind of touched on it earlier in the episode. Those are early indicators of your body knowing something's up before maybe your mind has caught up to the reality. And like Sophie said, we've both had so many different personal experiences with this. This is something we're still working through. So if you are hearing what we're saying right now and you're like, oh God, that's my story too, or that's something that is happening for me, this is normal.
This is normal. So this book, it's called When the Body Says No. It's by Dr. Gabor Mate. I'm really hoping I'm pronouncing his name correctly. He is a Canadian physician, and he's an expert in trauma, actually, and its impacts on physical and mental health. So his book, The Body Says No, it's a best-selling book, and it essentially connects chronic stress, your emotions, emotional repression, and trauma to physical illness, especially, and this is the kicker, in high-functioning people or people who are people pleasers, and people who've learned to really disconnect from themselves in order to stay successful or accepted. Who's getting called out right now?
Raise your hand.
As fuck. So if you've ever felt like your job was slowly eating away at your mental health and your energy, completely draining you, you need to read this book. The main idea in it is that your body's always speaking. And when we ignore our emotions, or when we overextend ourselves and we're sitting at a desk working 20 hours in a row, which I unfortunately have done before, and I'm not proud of it. When you're suppressing your body's needs for too long, your body will start speaking a hell of a lot louder than whatever work you're trying to accomplish. And often the way your body is speaking is going to be in actual illness, chronic pain, and absolutely burnout.
Yeah. And, Sophie and I, we're still young. We're still young, but we're getting up there. And it's also that awareness that if we continue down the path that we are going down right now,
it's bad, guys.
It's bad. The future looks bleak.
Yeah.
So it's easier to make these shifts when you have the awareness. Mm-hmm. And so now you have the awareness. Now you get to decide if you want chronic illness.
Yeah.
So make that fucking decision.
I'm crying.
For me, this manifests a lot in like tension in my jaw. Like sometimes I will work for 10 hours straight and I'll go to drink a measly sip of water and I'm like, my jaw fucking hurts. And it's because I've been holding so much tension in my jaw from the stress of the day, the anxiety, the overwhelm. And I'm treating my body like it's a machine.
That 100%.
You know?
My measly sip of water.
Seriously. I'm like, and also like trying to anticipate something going wrong before it actually does. So I'm working on these things in all fronts. My therapist must be absolutely exhausted. She's like, oh, same shit, just different version of
Alex
it.
literally goes to therapy with notes. Like
You're outing me right
she
now.
goes to therapy, and I respect it. I was like, I'm gonna do that.
I literally
and then I was
told
like,
you
I'm
this.
not
When
gonna
did
do
I
that.
tell you this? Like the first month we were like talking.
Yeah.
I was like, you were like, I need to not forget this for my
No,
therapist. And
I
was like,
told Alex that I wanted to put like an AI chat bot thing in my therapy appointments. And I literally, because I wanted like a summary of the notes of like everything. And I was like, hey, to my therapist, is there any way we can get like Otter on?
she was like, no.
She was like, no, we cannot do that.
I told Sophie, I was like, you can't rely on yourself to remember all the trauma because trauma, you can't remember it. It happens and then your brain like locks it up in a vault. Then you can't work through it. So I'm like, get your notes app out and just start dumping that shit as it comes up.
Yeah.
I mean, take it or leave it, but I think it's helpful.
Another thing that Dr. Mate discusses in this book is he talks about this disease-prone personality.
Doesn't sound super sexy when you put it like that.
No, it's a personality in high achievers, in caregivers, in people pleasers, but people who chronically suppress their anger or avoid conflict. To put it bluntly, if you're not taking care of your own needs and you are putting your work ahead of everything else in your life, you're going to die faster.
You're also going to be the red flag.
You're going to be the red flag. You're going to die faster. You're just going to fuck everything up. Your well-being is the most important thing. So anyways, a really huge theme in this book is how early attachment patterns shape how we show up in adulthood. So if you grew up needing to be good or needing to be helpful or, you know, really wanting to be viewed as successful in your parents' eyes, you will likely over-identify with your job. We're going to do put a finger down. You will likely, hold on, what did that say?
I mean, I could just put all my fingers down right now. We don't even have to go through it.
Okay, we're playing put a finger down. If you grew up, if you're watching the video, you'll see. If you grew up feeling like you had to be successful in your parents' eyes, yeah. Or if you have or do overextend your availability for other people. If you tie your worth to performance. God. Just a side note, I never thought that was a bad thing. My worth was always tied to how I was doing in school. My happiness revolved around getting A's fully. And when I graduated college, I was nervous because I was like, I don't know where I'm going to find fulfillment. I'm not kidding. I'm not kidding. I fully said to my friends, my parents, I don't know where I'm going to find fulfillment when I graduate school because my fulfillment is in how well I'm doing at school. And then my fulfillment started coming from how much money I was earning. And that is me tying my worth and fulfillment to performance. This is still something I'm struggling
100%.
with. It is still something I have not been able to separate. I still believe that my worth, like on a subconscious level, I know that it's wrong, but I still believe at some level, like my worth and the fulfillment that I have in life is tied to how well I'm doing in business.
Yeah.
Just like how growing up it was tied to how well. That's a fucking toxic mindset. It's a symptom of growing up in a way where you always felt like you had to prove yourself in a way. Like people spend years healing that aspect of themselves.
Yeah,
I just saw this man going on a fucking podcast and really talking about how he has really had to heal from this. I want to do ayahuasca, man.
Yeah.
I want to like go out and do like all these like crazy drugs, like heal me from this like fulfillment is tied to how much money I'm making concept.
Yeah. And I mean, it's rooted in that performance aspect. Growing up, my family, we would go out to eat dinner, and something that I would use to measure my worth at such a young age was my table manners. Like my table manners were so good. People at other tables were coming up to my parents saying,
crying.
Your daughter is so well behaved. So well behaved.
So you're getting this external validation.
No, and as soon as I started getting it, like it became a thing.
Right.
You know, and then every single restaurant we would go to, like me and my siblings, like we were killing it with the compliments. Like people are coming up, they're stopping our parents, and that created such a toxic mindset for me at such a young age. And I know that there's other people that have had similar experiences, and it's so crazy how deeply rooted it is. I'm bringing that up so we can like recognize this is really deeply rooted. It's okay if it takes you some time to work through it, but you need to start working through it.
Exactly. And dysregulation and high performance are lovers. So a lot of the people listening, if you're listening to this podcast right now, you probably consider yourself a high performer. And this is a huge thing that so many high performers can relate to. And Dr. Mate says that healing begins when you start listening inward instead of looking outward for approval. How the hell do I do that, Dr. Mate? I don't know. But if there's anything that we want you to know is if you are in a season of life where you're working your ass off, where you feel like your job is really starting to drain you, but you love it and you don't want to stop, or, you know, you have these symptoms that we're talking about, please go to therapy. And I think everyone in business who's trying to start something or doing anything, like, don't joke on therapy.
An investment in yourself,
like all these, like, it's such an investment in yourself, and you actually learn like actionable tools to help you better in your work, in your life, in every single area. So I want to end this episode by telling you to go to therapy. Thanks. When something feels wrong in your work relationships, it usually is. Whether it's physically, emotionally, or energetically, you don't have to wait for a breakdown to make a change. Boundaries don't have to be harsh or dramatic. They can be soft, they can be clear, and kind.
We created a free homework resource to help you take this deeper. It's linked in the show notes as always and includes a quick multiple choice quiz, a reflection prompt to help you unpack red flag dynamics, and a few put it into practice challenges.
We also included extra credit, a space to set one small boundary this week and track how it lands. If you haven't done any homework, please do this one, you guys. And if you loved today's episode, please leave us a review. We also love reading your comments and messages, and seeing you guys sharing it on your stories is insane. We couldn't be here week after week without you guys. So see you in class next week.